Hey, so I've got the track Rotary open right now, where we're going to be looking at the mix and master I've done for it. Just talking about like stuff I do to organise stuff, how I decide and like what things need to be where, and also like the little story behind this particular track. More so than like the tones I've talked about. So as I've mentioned previously, this track came as a previous song that I'd already worked on, and it came in loads of like different parts. That like I had in a previous project, but because it was in a different software, when I've exported all the audio, it's put it all in like a random order. So for example, I've still got these guitars here. So as you can see here, these are the rotary tempo with effects. So if we listen here, oh, my bad. One moment. Why can't we hear anything? Oh, there we are. So, as mentioned previously, it all came in loads of different WAV files. As you can see, these are just a few of the guitars that remain. These are like the original guitars. Some I've re-recorded, some I've left in. As you can hear, they sound very different, very dull. Not quite to the standard that I was going for. So, going beyond that, the first thing I did was I took all these files that I had, some of them being like files as long as the song. For example, the drums. The drums were all together, and they were like my guide for the full track. Because if I go to like here and I zoom out, as you can see, I had the whole drum for the whole song all the way through. So as soon as I imported them, they fit into the grid, they were at the right time, and like everything I needed. Where all the guitars, some of them I'd import and it'd be like in a really weird place because it'd only be a short clip. Or if I've cut a clip, it'd put it right to the beginning of the clip, but that's not necessarily where it was in the song. So I had to kind of like go through and sort through all those things. I took what I could and left whatever I didn't deem needed. So these are all like spare guitars. These are also the affected guitars. I also had the just clean DI tracks, which are what I used to build the guitars. So going from these old guitars in this folder I created to then these new guitars, which are the guitars I've now got. For example, these guitars here. Which are now like obviously the guitars that I now use in the track. So it was important to like filter out all those and bin off any ones that weren't savable. All the distorted guitars, all of these ones are re-recorded because like I couldn't do anything with what I'd been recorded. Like I could change the tone, but the takes weren't good enough, and you can't polish something that's rubbish, unfortunately. So I recorded in a DI, as mentioned, and then I just added on the effects myself. For this part, there's a little build-up with the guitars. So as well as the build-up of the guitars playing dynamically, I also added a fade in to try and make it a bit more like suspenseful. You can hear they can come in like say. And also if you look here, I've also recorded over this little part of the guitars because I wasn't happy with this little section here. So the only way in which I could get it right and in time was by redoing the take and then putting it back in place. Because if I pull this out here, you can see the silence of where I've done the take. but you wouldn't know the difference because I fitted it to the grid and I got it to where I wanted it to be. So if we listen now. As you can see, like there's no like distinct difference between the playing. And then originally, this guitar part, this guitar line, the single note one, all was a part of the solo, but I wanted to make the solo more distinct. So what I did was, before it played this first note of the solo, I cut it and I created a brand new track to do that, which is how like it traverses from here to here. But it's all from the same take. I've just moved it over so I can make it sound different, pan it slightly different, give it a bit more context in the song, somewhere to sit. And then going forward, as well as that, we've also got the drums. So the way in which I decided on where I wanted the drums in the mix, levels wise, is first off I initially got a mix on my drums and what I liked. I'll just mute all these guitars. I created a mix I was happy with. And the way in which I do this is I pull everything to 0. I'm ignoring the drum parallel compression and the drum verb. Pull everything to 0. Pull the kick in to a reasonable level. And then just start introducing stuff. So like listening now I can hear that there's too much overhead, so I'm gonna pull these down slightly. Listen again. So that's sounding better, which could all be fine, but then what happens when I put the bass in? Like, does the kick disappear? Is the kick loud enough? So in this instance, it is loud enough, but like, it's just like, you've got to think like, you're not gonna listen to everything individually, you're gonna listen to it all together. So this goes for everything, so whether it be the drums, the guitars, if I'm ever having trouble with a mix, I'll just pull everything to 0 and then sort the individual mixes for, like, say, well, like the drums, this is an overall mix. And then from there, I'll go down to here, I'll select all my channels on my drums. So kick, snare, toms, overhead, left and right. Groups, new group, drums. And then once that's created, this will allow me to move these faders simultaneously. So I need to pull the drums down, pull the drums up, it'll pull them all up together. And then I can do this with absolutely anything. This is either in folders, so like I can create groups for the folders. As you can see here, allow me to assign to a group to a folder. But in doing this, it allows me to like only put stuff in what's necessary and not overdo stuff. Especially when it comes to like vocals, I'll get my vocals somewhere I can hear them so I can create the tone in the mix. And then once that's done, I'll go over to my vocals, pull them both down. Obviously by this point I'd probably group these two together, as I'd get them balanced first and then I'd go ahead and figure out where it wants to be in the mix, because you don't want it to be way too loud like this. It makes me think it's just completely unnecessary. So the best way to do it is go from 0, or go from the bottom, sorry, and then just build it up. So yeah, that's the mixing side of things done. Moving on to the master now. Now, I have adjusted things now, so this is going to be wrong. But the way in which I master it is I create an aux input track a stereo aux input track where everything is then routed to it. So as you can see here, all the instruments are routed to this stereo aux input that I've named master, which is this green channel here. And then once that's all in there, this master channel goes to a master fader. A master fader, even though it'll allow me to put inserts on, is literally just a volume fader for the whole thing. So this needs to remain at 0. It should always be at 0, and the master next to it should just be at 0 as well. So the ultimate goal here is to get the mix as loud as it possibly can be within reason, for like depending on where it's going. So if it's going to streaming services, it needs to be at over -14 LUFS. Even though that's the maximum, you want the full track to be over that, so that like the lowest volume is about -14. And then from there, like getting rid of any parts that aren't necessary, clearing the mix and getting a nice balanced mix, so it sounds good on all devices. So going through my chain and my signal bus processing, I've got this plugin called the BX Master Deck Classic. It's like a mixture of a compressor that also has like a filter that focuses on where you want the mix to focus on, which is this foundation dial here. It also has a stereo enhancer, a volume, an output trim. You can compress it hard, and there's also a threshold. So if I play from the beginning here, as you can hear, when I move the foundation dial, it like takes the focus away from certain parts. So when the foundation's at 30, it focuses more on the low end and dulls the mix. But if I put it all the way down to -30, it like focuses on the high end, and it makes the mix a bit more thin. So which is obviously quite useful depending on if you want your mix to sound more dull, if maybe it's too bright and you want to bring it down, or maybe your mix isn't bright enough and you want to bring that up. This is good for that. As well as this, obviously the volume is very, very useful. It's good at like bringing the level up when you need it. This VU meter is good at like displaying where like it's coming out at and like how hard your like master deck's coming out of. Moving on anyway, like once I've placed the master deck on, which is like the majority of the oomph for the mix, I'll assign the pro limiter at the bottom here. The pro limiter, my settings are always pretty much the same. I'm just changing the ceiling to -0.3, and I'm using this to read how many LUFS is coming out. So as you can see here, I'm currently coming out at -11. The range is 7.2. But if I press play, it'll tell me where the LUFS are coming out at, like as it's playing. It's currently coming out at -11 or 12. We can also listen when it's hitting that ceiling, which is what that noise is. This is pretty much the core plugin for figuring out the master, because watching the LUFS is very important. You want to know where it's at, but you don't want to be overdoing this. You don't want to be touching the threshold dial. You're just using it for this ceiling, so you can cap it, so you're getting the maximum volume without going over the threshold. You're gonna think of it like a brick wall compressor, and like it's meant to hit that ceiling and it will not go above it. So then from here, once I've used my master deck and my pro limiter, I'll go into the actual master fader and I'll load up a plugin that I have called Span Plus. Now this is a visual graphic of the frequencies and where it's coming out at, starting like all the way at 20, all the way at 20k. It'll show me like a physical display of the frequencies. It'll show me where like the frequencies are the most prominent. So as you can see here, at around 2.38k is the loudest part, which is probably like where the majority like of the guitars are on the high end. But as you can see here, like my mix is fairly balanced. If I change to, I've got the presets and I've got a stereo smoothed, this will show me like a smooth version of like the mix. So ideally, what I'm aiming for is I want my mix to be like, first off, getting it like as flat as I possibly can. And then after that, ensuring that like the mids aren't as prominent as the lows and the highs, because the human ear hears mids and like higher frequencies more than it does lower frequencies. So it's about getting a nice balance and getting the right shape, also known as the Fletcher-Munson curve. So using this stereo smooth, it like shows me like where I need to put it. So like the greens represent like a good level, and the reds represent where it probably needs a bit more. But as you can see here, my mix is fairly balanced. It's quite flat. And this is the peak of the song, and you can quite clearly see that like it goes up, slightly down, and then up again for the bass. It's not going to be like a straight line flat. It's going to be always consistently moving. But if I take this EQ off, oh, now we look. You can see that there's more gaps now than there was. So basically what I do is open up this Band Plus. I look at like where it needs a boost. I use the mouse to see where it is. So say it's 3.8 kilohertz. I'll look there, and then I'll switch over to a 7-band EQ that I've got open on the aux input, and then on there I'll boost where I've looked with either a shelving filter or like the low shelving filter, or like just a small EQ. I leave them quite wide because I want to like increase that range and not just like a peculiar one frequency. Like if I need to reduce specific frequency, I do that on individual parts. But this is going to be the overall EQ and getting like the best sound out of it. So in doing this, going on, loading up, looking, all right, the highs aren't as high as I want them to be, so let's boost them. Or this particular section is pumping a bit too much. As you can see, I mentioned the high mids are like the hottest part, so I've decreased those by about 2 decibels. And the low end wasn't as prominent as I wanted it to be, so I've then boosted the low end at around 67 hertz, which like obviously pans past 100 and even lower, and then boosting that. So in doing that, I get the maximum sound I can out of it, of the mix, combined with the master deck, this EQ that corrects the little bits that I needed to correct, and then watching the Pro limiter to ensure I get the volume I need it at, and the Span Plus. I can like get a nice mix. Now you're probably wondering like what do we do if like we're hitting red with these lights? So the main thing to do is, before anything, what you want to do is you want to come over to all in your groups, all, and you want to pull everything down, because everything will be way too loud. You want to pull it down until it's about, should we say like around, you want it to be coming out at around -6, I'd say, on your master fader. And then once it's coming out at -6, you want to turn groups off, and with Alt, hold Alt and click on your 2 masters, and it'll bring them back up to 0. And then from there is where you like take your time to build up the loudness, build up your spectrum of your mix. And yeah, that's it really for my mix and master for this track. I'm gonna go through the other tracks, but overall like the processes are very similar. Any like particular parts, I'm gonna like in other tracks, whether it be like automation, I'm gonna talk about those. But this is just like a general overview of what I like to do for my mixes and what I do for my mastering chain. So yeah, thank you very much.